Kotura, the great Siberian wind god. The great winds blew, and it was so cold. It blew the tents. It blew them open. It blew the snow. It blew the fires out within the tents of the 7 tribes. The wind blew so cold that they were surely to die. The old grandfather knew if he did not send Kotura, the wind god, a wife, everybody was surely to perish. So he told his oldest granddaughter, he said, "Oldest granddaughter, you must go to Kotura and give yourself as a wife. Get on the sled. No matter how hard the wind blows and how much snow gets in your shoes, you must not stop. You must not stop to shake the snow out of your shoes. You must not stop to tie your coat. You must not stop until you reach the mountain. When you reach the mountain, a bird will come to you. Do not slap him away. Pet the bird. The bird will take you to a Kotura's tent. Do not go into the tent until you're invited. Do not eat anything. Do not do anything until you are instructed." So oldest granddaughter set out. She pushed the sled. She gave the sled one hard push. And off into the storm she rode. The snow blew into her shoes, but she did not take grandfather's advice. She stopped to shake the snow out of her shoes. She restarted and she went again. She stopped to retie the strings of her coat. And she finally reached the mountain. When she reached the mountain, she saw the little bird. Instead of petting the bird, she swatted the bird away. The little bird flew away. She went down the side of the mountain anyway, and she found the tent. And inside the tent, it looked so warm. So she opened the flap, and she went in and she sat down. And there was a big deer roast. And she helped herself, and she ate as much deer fat and as much deer as she could hold. Finally, Kotura come in. He said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "Grandfather sent me for you to take as a wife." And he laughed and he said, "Why would I take you for a wife?" And she said, "To save my people, we are going to freeze to death if the wind does not stop blowing." So he told her, Fix me something to eat. I am hungry. Split this roast in half. So she split what was left in half, and she fed Kotura. He said, take the other half to the nearest tent and give it to the old lady. Wait for her to give you the pot back, and then come back. She takes the pot and she walks outside, and the wind is just bitter cold and it's dark, and she doesn't see a tent. So she just pitches the food out into the snow. And she brings the pot back to Kotura, and he says, that was awful fast, he said. Let me see what she sent back. And he looked, and there was nothing in the pot. So he put the pot back down. He said, well, we will see what you can do in the morning. In the morning, he brought her some deer skin. And he said, I am going hunting. And when I come back, I expect that you will have made me new deerskin jacket, gloves, and moccasins. That was a lot of work for one day. So she started scraping the hides, and she started cutting without measuring, and she just started piecing together. And an old woman appeared. She said, young lady, I have something in my eye. Can you help me get something out of my eye? My eye hurts really bad. And she said, oh, woman, get out of here. I do not have time for you. She said, I have to get these clothes made. So the old woman left. When Kotura returned, he said, do you have my clothes finished? So she gave him the clothes that was finished, and he put them on. And the clothes had holes in them. They did not fit. They were not scraped right. They were not cut right. And he just laughed at her, and he said, you would not make a good wife. And he just took her and he just threw her out in the snow for her to freeze to death. The winds picked up and they blew even harder, and the snow piled higher than ever before. The old grandfather knew that the eldest granddaughter did not follow the directions, for they were all freezing to death in the village. So he knew he must send his second eldest granddaughter. Second eldest granddaughter, he says, you must go to Kotura, the great wind god. He must take you to wife. You must do what he says. You must make him like you, for your people depend on you, or we are going to freeze to death. You get on this sled and you do not stop until you reach the mountain. You do not stop to shake the shoes, the snow from your shoes. Do not stop to tie the strings on your coat until you reach the mountain. When you reach the mountain, you will see a bird. Pet the bird. The bird will show you the way. So second eldest granddaughter gives the sled a big push and she's off on her way. She gets about halfway there and her shoes fill up with snow and she starts shivering. Her coat comes untied and the wind starts blowing through her and she is cold and she does not follow her grandfather's directions. She stops and she shakes the snow out of her shoes and she reties the strings on her coat. And she restarts. When she finally reaches the mountain, she does as the eldest granddaughter does. When the bird appears, she does not pet the bird. She shoos the bird away. She finds her way to Kotura's tent, and the same thing. When she walks into the tent, it smells so good. She can't resist. She can't hold back. She can't resist. She starts slurping up the deer roast. She starts peeling back the fat. She just eats until her heart is content. Kotura walks in and he says, "Who are you and what are you doing in my tent?" She says, "I am second eldest granddaughter, and grandfather sent me for you to wife." And he laughed and he says, "And what makes you fit for me to take as a wife?" He said, "I'm hungry. Fix me something to eat." So she cuts the roast in half and he eats. He said, "Now take the other half of the roast down to the nearest tent. Give it to the neighbor and wait for her to give you back the pot. Bring the pot back to me." So she sets out to find the neighbor. It's cold and it's dark and she sees no tent. So she does the same as eldest granddaughter does. She just throws the meat out into the snow to rot. And she comes back. And Kotura says, "That was awful fast. Did you find the neighbor?" She says, "Yes, I did." And he said, "What did she give you in return?" She said, "She gave me nothing in return." And he said, "Let me see." And she gave him the pot, and sure enough, there was nothing in the pot. He said, "In the morning you will be making me some new clothes." So the next morning they wake up and he says, "I am going hunting. While I am gone, you will take these deer skins and you will make me new gloves, new jacket, and new shoes. You will have one day to get it done." She says, "I can't get that done in one day." And he said, "Well, that's all the time you have." So she gets to cutting and sewing and scraping, just like eldest granddaughter did. An old lady comes to the tent and she pulls the flap back. And she says, "Young lady, I have something in my eye, and my eye hurts. Can you look in my eye and get whatever it is?" And she says, "Oh, woman, I am busy sewing. I do not have time for you. Now, shoo, get out of here." And the old woman leaves. So when Kotura returns, he asks her, "Do you have all my clothes?" And she gives Kotura what she has. And again, the clothes are too little. They don't fit him. They're ill-made. And he takes her and he throws her out in the snow to freeze to death with the eldest granddaughter. So the winds pick up and the storm is raging and the snow is building. The storm is hitting the village so bad they can't keep their tents up. They can't keep the fires going. And they're perishing so fast. The old man knew second eldest granddaughter had failed. She did not listen to what he had said. He had one granddaughter left. He knew he had to send her. For if he didn't, all the tribes would die. So he told her, "Youngest granddaughter, you must listen to me. When the snow is so cold in your shoes, you must not stop to shake them out. When the snow and the wind is so hard that the strings of your coat unravel, you must not stop to retie them. When you reach the mountain, you must pet the bird. When you reach Kotura's tent, you must wait for instructions and do not eat." So, with one big push, off youngest granddaughter went. When the snow filled up her shoes, she did not stop. When the wind unraveled her strings of her coat, she did not stop. When she finally reached the mountain, the bird came, and she did not shoo the bird away. She pet the bird. She stroked him, and she held the little bird. And at that time, she tied her coat strings and then shook the snow out of her shoes. The bird then took her to a tent and lifted the flaps. And there she waited. Kotura finally come, and he said, "Who are you?" She says, "I am youngest granddaughter." He said, "And what do you want?" She said, "Grandfather sent me to be your wife." He said, "What makes you fit to be my wife?" She said, I am the only one strong enough to stop this wind and stop the storm. And he laughed. And he said, why are you standing outside the tent? She said, because you have not invited me in. And he said, well, please come in. You must be starved. Have something to eat. Please cut the roast in half and let's enjoy a meal. So they ate. He said, now you must take this half of the roast to the nearest neighbor, to the next tent, and give it to the neighbor, and wait for her to return the pot. She said, yes, Kotura. So she went out into the raging storm and into the dark, and she did not see a tent. But after roaming around for a while, she seen a mound, and she knocked on the door, and an old lady answered. And she said, hello, grandmother. And she said, hello, youngest granddaughter. She said, Kotura told me to bring you this meat. And she said, oh, yes, I have been expecting it. She said, please hold on a minute. So she took in the pot, and it seemed like forever. And she waited and she waited. And finally the grandmother came back to the door. She handed her her pot. She said, inside you will find many helpful things that will help you in the morning. She said, yes, grandmother. And she went back. When she come back, Kotura said, you was gone an awful long time. Did you find the tent? And she said, yes, Kotura. And he said, show me, let me see. So he opened the pot, and he found needles and thread and scissors and scrapers and everything that would help her make the clothes the next morning. And he laughed, and he said, oh, grandmother gave you many helpful things. He said, lay down, we must sleep. He said, if you can make my clothes in the morning, he said, I will take you as my wife. So morning come, and he said, I am going hunting. And he gave her deer skins. He said, you must make me a coat, mittens, and shoes by the time I get back, and they must fit. And if you do these things, I will take you to wife, and together we will stop the storm. So he went hunting, and she got to work, scraping and measuring and using all her tools, her sharp needles and her threads and everything. And a little bit went by, and the old woman come and opened the flap. And as busy as she was, the old woman said, honey, there's something in my eye. Would you take the time to get whatever is in my eye out of my eye? So she stopped making the clothes to take time to help the old woman. She got the sty out of the old woman's eye. And the old woman said, "Thank you, hon. I am no longer in pain." She said, "Now look in my ear. Tell me, what do you see?" So she looked in her ear and she said, "I see a maiden." And the old woman said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Ask the maiden if she will help you make the clothes." So she asked the maiden to help her make the clothes. Well, out popped the maiden and 3 more. So 4 maidens popped out to help her make the clothes. So the 4 maidens, the old woman, and youngest granddaughter sat there all day making these beautiful clothes. They heard Kotura coming, so they jumped back in the old woman's ear and the old woman disappeared. Kotura walks in and he said, "Youngest granddaughter, have you succeeded? Have you made my clothes?" She said, "Yes, Kotura, I have your clothes." He said, "Let me see." So he takes the clothes, and they're beautiful. They fit perfect. Everything's just right. He said, "I will marry you." And she said, "Oh," and she was just so happy. He says, "It seems like my grandmother and my 4 sisters really like you too." And the storm stopped.